A living organism is expected to be ruthlessly selfish in its own quest for its survival and reproduction. Selfishness, not altruism. Alternatively, altruism is selfishness. Living organisms are engines of self-preservation, aiming for the successful replication of their genes. Beyond the kin, if organisms live in groups, it is because the group provides a survival edge. Human societies were created to protect from external threats like predators or other humans. Individuals organize themselves in groups for their collective survival and dominance over other groups. What is true for the individuals is true for the states. Faced with danger and competition, statesmen must put the interest of their states above the others. When states have become hijacked or invaded, and the natives are too weak to fight off the invasion, the natives seek the end of the parasitic use of the state by the invaders at the expense of the host, by fighting for its decentralization so that they can retreat and regroup. Humans wage war for reasons predicted by evolutionary theory, to gain and protect vital resources that increase their ability to survive and reproduce. Humans are not the only species to wage war. Coalitionary aggression is common in animals and insects and bacteria. We will go over this in a future video. Natural selection is a deep cause of human warfare. It ultimately explains the quote, us versus them, close quote, xenophobia and ethnocentrism. Groups with the greatest capacity for effective cooperation in attack or defense prevailed and produced more offspring to perpetuate their evolutionary edge. Natural selection not only acts at the individual level, but also at the level of the group. War evolved into a process that favored the self-sacrificing tendencies of warriors. Groups with more altruistic warriors had a better chance to prevail. But there are many forms of waging war, not just armed conflict, and they all involve competitive struggle between groups for dominance. Ultimately, groups with more cohesion, with members ready to subordinate their explicitly own interest for the greater good of their commune, and thereby advancing their genetic interest by doing so, will have an evolutionary advantage over those composed mainly of seemingly selfish organisms. Life in a nutshell seemed to follow four principles quite consistently. 1. To reproduce. 2. To get rid of dissatisfactions and discomforts which serve to benefit the genes. 3. To replicate and preserve your genetic trait and get it reinforced, i.e. your species, preferably your clustering gene expression, i.e. your subspecies. And 4. To find a stable model for the continuation and preservation of 1, 2, and 3. Groups that adhere to these principles have, as stated, evolutionary advantages, like Kevin MacDonald points out. It has long been apparent to evolutionists that highly cohesive altruistic groups would outcompete concatenations of individualists. Genetic similarity does, as mentioned, also explain culture, as can be observed in another quote of Kevin MacDonald. Culture gets created to strengthen the in-group bond, and distance the bond to the out-groups even further, much like an extra safety mechanism. Culture is to genetic groups what safety gear is to a body and what the body is to the genes. Groups become interesting to an evolutionist when there are active attempts to segregate the group from the surrounding peoples, a situation that results in what Abel Abelsfeld, 1979, in page 122, terms, quote, cultural pseudospeciation. Creating a group evolutionary strategy results in the possibility of cultural group selection resulting from between-group competition in which the groups are defined by culturally produced in-groups markings. Richardson and Boyd, 1995. Michael H. Art, in the book Understanding Human History, points out, much like Vandenberg, that what is in focus here is the gene. He writes, quote, "We have all heard the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? A wit once said a chicken is just a egg's way of making another egg. For a long time that was considered just as a clever quip, but we now realize that the alternative way it suggests of viewing reproduction provides valuable insights. At first glance, these two statements appear to correspond perfectly. A person, or animal or plant, uses genes to create another person, or animal or plant. Genes use a person, or animal or plant, to create more genes. And like Michael Hart and Vandenberg's thesis, the biologist Richard Dawkins wrote in his celebrated book The Selfish Gene, in which he emphasized the gene's eye view of reproduction, that, quote, "Of course a gene is just a molecule with no consciousness or purpose at all, selfish or otherwise. However, the result of natural selection is much the same as if the genes actually were selfish, and you will rarely reach a wrong conclusion by viewing them as such." Close quote. As Michael H. Art pointed out, quote, "Genes are just molecules, and they can easily be destroyed by heat, by radiation, or by dangerous chemicals in the outside world. To protect themselves, the genes construct a container around themselves to keep out harmful chemicals and radiation, a, quote, house, close quote, with thermostat that keeps the temperature nearly constant. If the house, i.e. the human being or animal produced by the genes, is well designed, then the genes can survive and replicate. If the house has serious defects, the genes inside it will die."